So next we want to talk about natural gas extraction. Natural gas has been increasing over the last couple of decades because it's a cleaner burning source of fuel. And so it produces less greenhouse gases and less air pollution in general than burning oil, definitely than burning coal. And so we also have to extract that. And so we can see a common method. There's a couple different ways to do it. So one is just to be able to get down into a reserve of gas and pull it up. Another way is called hydraulic fracturing. And so this is much deeper and it pushes water down, hence the term hydraulic, and causes these small fractures to help pull natural gas up for storage and use. So fracking impacts on energy sources. We see that it has allowed us to get a lot more natural gas out of the ground. Over time, we see that from like the 1800s, all of these different sources have increased through time. But more recently, we see that petroleum has been a little bit more steady, but natural gas has been rising. And recently, the use of coal has gone down. Nuclear in the US has still been increasing, as has renewables and energy from biomass, so things like burning trees, burning wood to make energy. So what are some potential environmental impacts of fracking? So this is used to access oil and gas that are locked in non-porous rocks. So it creates these fissures and it puts fracking fluid into these fissures to open up networks of fractures in shale. Sand props the fractures open. Gas flows from the fractures into a pipe. And the holes in the well allow the fluid to exit and the gas to enter. So that's basically how this works. What can happen is that fracking fluid can potentially leak. This says that it's highly unlikely for it to come this way, but poorly treated flowback water has leaked into drinking water, and leakage of fracking fluids from these pipes have generally not been seen. But when we store the water, sometimes it does leak into our drinking water, and so that is a potential problem. We also see that sometimes methane gas escapes during the mining process. Methane is a powerful greenhouse gas. It has 16 times the warming of a molecule of carbon dioxide. So methane leaking into the atmosphere is definitely a problem for climate change. And there are also possibles that blowouts can happen as well. So I said that gas pads you can see all over the place. So this shows some pictures. A lot of times when you drive down the road, it looks like it's mostly forested and you just see these little like gravel roads. But if you get an aerial view, you can see how much the forest is actually fragmented into little bits by all of these gas pads. So this is southeast of Shreveport, and you can see each of these little patches cleared out of the forest. Those are all gas pads. And this shows where some of the different places where gas is stored underground in the United States. Okay, so we also need to talk about the environmental impacts of mineral extraction. So strip mining and other practices involve the disturbance or removal of the land surface. This creates about 80,000 metric tons of of dust, and greater than 100 toxic air pollutants are created in this process as well. We also have chemical and sediment runoff. So when sulfide ores, which is for many metals, are exposed to air and water, they produce sulfuric acid. If you remember from chemistry class, sulfuric acid is a very strong acid, and this creates acid mine drainage, which is very harmful to both terrestrial and freshwater ecosystems. So you can see here some of the processes of this water draining out of these mines and how it can negatively impact aquatic plants and animals. So we can have nearby waters contaminated with toxic substances, sediment, and heavy metals. So how do we process these ores? Large quantities of ore must be crushed and washed to obtain very small quantities of a metal. Metals are extracted from the ores by heating or treatment with chemical solvents. So smelting is when you roast the ore to release the metals, and this can cause a large amount of air pollution. We also have something called heap leach extraction. This is when a crushed ore is piled in these large heaps, and then it's sprayed with a dilute alkaline cyanide solution, which percolates through a pile to dissolve the gold. So this is how we get gold out of large amounts of ore. But I'm sure you're all aware, cyanide is very poisonous. And so the effluent, the liquids leaking out of these heaps are left behind in ponds, and they can leak into surface water or groundwater, especially if a storm comes through and disrupts these ponds in any way. All right, I'm going to talk a little bit about small-scale gold mining. This is something that is kind of romanticized in United States history. Mixers would pump a mix of water and sediment into a trough, like you can see here, to suspend the sediment. They would add mercury, which would bind to gold particles, forming an amalgam that would sink to the bottom where they could collect it. They would then burn off the mercury so that the gold would remain. This mercury waste gets into terrestrial and aquatic ecosystems. We know that mercury can be very poisonous to people, and mercury vapors would get into the atmosphere where they could be carried to other places, so the pollution might not just be local, it might be carried to other places. Important point here is that you need 6 pounds of mercury to extract 1 pound of gold. So that is a lot of a toxic substance to get a little bit of something that's valuable. All right, so what do? We've got all this toxic stuff that is caused when we do some of these different mining practices. So we need to be able to deal with all this mining waste. So in 1977, we had the Surface Mining Control and Reclamation Act, and it requires mining companies to restore surface mined lands. However, this is really hard to do, and it's very expensive. It's paid for by taxes on the mining companies, and complete reclamation often costs more than $10,000 per hectare. So some of these mines take up much more space than that, and so they need a lot of money to deal with the waste from these mines. Oh, before I move on, I also want to say that sometimes these companies go bankrupt and they're not able to pay these taxes. So sometimes taxpayers end up paying for mining reclamation, basically trying to restore these surface mined lands, or sometimes they just sit not restored for a very long time. So that is another potential impact.